Hey, what's up guys? Jamie Fenn here. Today I'm going to show you how to create this super deep green cinematic look in Davinci Resolve. This is super popular in travel films, in shots with a lot of deep green foliage, but this power grade also works on all types of footage. Not only am I going to show you how to create this look, but I'm also going to show you a few tips and tricks that will make your color grades from here on out significantly better. Now, if you want to download the power grade, it's linked down in the description. There's a few extra saucy nodes that I've included in the power grade that I won't cover today. This also comes as a LUT in my LUT pack, so if you guys want to download my LUTs, those are also linked down in the description. All right, let's begin. First, let's talk about some project color management settings. Down here on the right-hand side, you'll see a little cog. Go ahead and click it. Under the color management tab, this is my color space and transform settings. My monitor is calibrated to 2.4, but if you're on a Mac, you can put Rec. 709A. Go ahead and click save. Here's the clip we're going to do the look on. This was shot on a Sony a7S III with an anamorphic lens. The first thing I want to do is right click on it, go to clip attributes, and go to the pixel aspect ratio and select custom. This lens had a 1.6 squeeze factor. Now let's hop over to the color tab. On this first node here, we want to convert what the camera was shot in to our timeline color space. So come up here to the right hand side, select effects, and drag the color space transform on the first node. The input color space is what our camera was shot in. Mine was shot in S Gamut 3 Cine, and the input gamma was S Log 3. We're going to convert it to our timeline color space, which is Davinci Wide Gamut and Davinci Intermediate. Go ahead and create another node. You can do that by right-clicking and selecting Add Node and adding a serial. Or you can just hold down Option and push S on your keyboard. Let's go ahead and drag another color space transform on this second node. For the input color space, we want to do Davinci Wide Gamut, and then Davinci Intermediate, and then the output color space, we're going to select Rec. 709, and for the output gamma, you're going to select Cineon Film Log. Let's go ahead and create another node. On this node here, you want to right-click, select LUT, come down to Film Looks, and select one of the Fujifilm 3513s. So let's go ahead and click on this first node here, and we're going to add another serial node. I'm going to rename this by right-clicking on it and selecting Node Label, and I'm just going to name this WB for white balance. On the white balance node, you want to come down here to the little eyedropper and find something that's neutral in the shot. And that could be this tab right here, this little white tab, or even something gray in the shot. Next, what we want to do is add another node. I'm going to right-click on this one and label it Balance. Now I'm going to move throughout the shot and just see where her skin tones are sitting. I'm going to bring over my little eyedropper and see that it's a little overexposed. So there's a few things we can do. I can simply just drag down the highlights a little bit. And then I'm also looking at our shadows over here on the waveform. I'm going to bring up the midtones and have them sit right about there. Looks good. Next, what we want to do is add another serial node. Go ahead and right click on that and let's rename this Contrast. Now the Fujifilm LUTs are actually a little less contrasty than the 2383s, and that's why I like using them. I like to add contrast and build my look instead of trying to reduce the contrast. So with that contrast node selected, come down here to the curves, and then let's go ahead and click on this first little icon, and then come over here to the three little dots and make sure that you have editable splines selected. Click on the top point. Let's go ahead and bring this up right about like that. Then click on the bottom one, and let's bring down the shadows a little bit. Now, adding contrast actually adds saturation. Just keep that in mind when moving forward. Okay, so now let's create another node, and we're gonna rename this Look. Now, this is where we're gonna have a lot of fun. Within our curves adjustments, come over here to the hue versus saturation. Go ahead and click on the yellow, and go ahead and click on the green. Pull down on the yellow point almost all the way. We're going to really exaggerate this, and you'll see why. Then go ahead and pull down on the green as well. As you can see, we're already getting a really cool dark and moody feel to this. It's looking awesome. Then come over here to the next little icon that's the hue versus luminance. Click on the yellow and the green, and once again, let's go ahead and pull down the luminance of the yellow and then the green. And depending on how dark you want to make the yellows and greens will basically come up to your personal taste. But during the look process, try to exaggerate what you're trying to do, because towards the end, you'll see how I'm going to adjust it to get your personal flavor. All right, So now let's go ahead and create another node, and we're going to rename this saturation. Now, I like to do saturation a very specific way, but this technique of pushing saturation into the image I have found seems to be way better than just pushing the saturation here in the primary color wheels. So with the saturation node selected, right click on it, and we're going to select color space and select HSV. Then right click on that clip again, come down to channels, let's disable channel 1, right click on it again, come down to channels and disable channel 3. With the saturation node selected, come over here to the primary color wheels, and we're going to push the gain wheel up. Now, if we're looking at our vector scope, you guys can see how far we can push this. Now, I like to add just a little bit more saturation to the shot just because the Fujifilm LUT is a little bit more natural than the 2383. So if I pay attention to the skin tones, I can kind of see where they're sitting here, and the skin tones are actually pretty spot on. The backpack is pretty saturated. Now, since I'm pushing saturation in this node, we can always come back to the look node and look at our vector scope and say, okay, maybe the blues are a little too punchy. So we can also come down here, select the blue with our hue versus saturation. We can just pull this back a little bit like this. After the saturation node, what I like to do is add a new node and label it Sharpening. With that node selected, come down here to this little teardrop in Sharpening, which stands for blurring and sharpening. Make sure that the sharpening icon here is selected. Come over here to the radius and let's go ahead and pull this down. I typically don't like to go lower than 46. That's kind of over sharpening in my opinion, no matter what camera you're using. Scroll in and find something that has some texture, something that's in focus. Come down here to the level and turn this up. And you really have to pixel peep to see how the coring softness and the level affect one another. But if I turn up the level, you can see here on this ring, on the key ring, that it's sharpening, and you kind of want to just play with it a little bit and then turn up the coring softness to help blend. You don't want to push the coring softness number higher than the level number, or essentially it just doesn't do anything. As you can see, I've made all of these adjustments here within the CST sandwich. I've had numerous colorists say you don't ever typically want to make any major adjustments outside of the film look emulation. But there is one thing that I personally like to do. So let's go ahead and add a new node. Right click on it and let's just name it Trim. And on this Trim node, I come into the HDR tab, and the first thing I do is I scroll all the way down to the bottom color wheels and look at the black. Now, let's go ahead and click on Vector Scope and pull up our waveform. And what I like to do is come down here, and where it says saturation, you can pull the saturation down all the way, if that's the look you're going for. Now, this will completely desaturate the blacks and make them true black. Now, I like to leave just a little bit of room here. I don't completely desaturate it. And then as far as the highlights go, I do the exact same thing. I come up here to the specular and even sometimes the highlight, and I will pull the saturation down a little bit. But you guys have to remember, the film emulation LUTs do have a specific look for the highlights and the shadows. So you don't want to completely destroy that. Look at the waveform down here. When I disable it, you'll see how much this affects the overall image. So some of you may be looking at this and say, hey, this is a little too much. This is a little too desaturated. Well, what's great is that you can come over to the look node that we created and then come down here to where it says key. Go ahead and select key. And then what you can do is select the gain here. Click on the 1 and pull this number down. So essentially what you can do is you can pull this down, and 0.5, for example, would be 50%. So even pulling this down to 0.5 looks awesome. Disabling, re-enabling. And so using this key output will allow you to have a tremendous amount of flexibility when it comes to fine-tuning this look to the way you want it. And then lastly, if you want, you can come back here to the contrast and, just add a little bit more contrast to make it really moody. Let's go ahead and pull this down. And you can really get it to be, really dark in the forest and make it look awesome.